My name is Jonathan Teubner. I am a researcher at the Human Flourishing Program at Harvard, where I run a lot of the programs and direct the research related to artificial intelligence and emerging technology. I'm also the founder of an AI company, Filter Labs AI, that is also based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Last month in December, we gathered a group of really fantastic scholars together in Rome, Italy, to bring together some people who were thinking about how technology, particularly this emerging technology that is driven by artificial intelligence and some machine learning, to re-embed that into our communities and into our society. We call this project the Human Network Initiative. And what we're trying to do is find a way to think about the implications and the possibilities for bringing technology back into the space that it's a tool for us, that it becomes useful for humanity there, as opposed to something that seems to often be using us as its tool. We recently gathered together to bring together some scholars to discuss over 2 days their research on the ways in which technology is challenging some of our kind of ethical, cultural, and value norms at times, as well as those possibilities for it turning into something that's useful. So, a couple of the big high-level insights that I took away from the session was that often we are overestimating the actual technological prowess and capability of a lot of the tools out there. And there's two clear consequences. One, we're not really sure how to assess the risk there if we haven't really assessed its capability just yet. And the other is that often we're finding people are using tools, using online digital tools for things that aren't for things for which they weren't actually well purposed for. For example, some people are using like ChatGPT to do research for them, but ChatGPT, if you like say, go find me so many articles on something, it's just as likely to make up the article that it never actually existed. So that would be an example of someone trying to use a tool um, that wasn't for the right purpose in that. The other pieces of this that we're finding are there's some clear pathways, we think, and potential for companies to think more about how to integrate a much more like virtue ethics or more kind of rigorous, humane kind of value systems into how technologies operate and also at the investor level, how investors are thinking about investing for the common good as opposed to just investing only on shareholder value. So those are some of the big things that we're taking away was on the one hand, we're seeing the need to properly evaluate and understand the technology to be able to then assess risk around it and assess like what it can do for us as a society, as a culture, um, and as polities, ultimately. The symposium was a really important opportunity to bring together not only scholars who are thinking about this, but people from industry, as well as those from the policy community who are thinking through regulation. We had a really fantastic range of people from someone like Josiah Ober, who's doing really wonderful philosophical investigations into what are like around ethics and AI, to someone like Christian Wolff from Berlin, who was working in the Chancellery in Germany on a lot of the EU AI regulation for a while, and as well as some industry players. One person who gave a paper was a partner at a VC who's trying to think through how can I start to help companies become um, like companies that build for flourishing, companies that build technology that add agency, not take agency away. And so those are like that's a unique opportunity to have that. And I think one thing that a lot of scholars will often say is, we really like this. These are good conversations, but we really need to have contact with industry. They're making so many significant decisions. And we were able to bring those together. And so that's part of the impact I think that we'll see is people are going to see that we brought together industry people, scholars, people from the policy and regulatory community in a really productive way to have some fantastic discussions as almost like a new model for how these conversations should happen, as opposed to having scholars convene, write their stuff, and then try to send it and get take up from policymakers or get some kind of attention from the industry. We need to be in these conversations together. So I think that if we were to think about the symposium and the broader Human Network Initiative along the lines of like, what does success look like for us? I think on the one hand, there's kind of like the low bar of success is we want to be attracting the significant industry players, regulatory people who are trying to ask big questions, and those scholars who are trying to answer that and bring together. It's a real like it's a forum, it's a place that they can have a conversation. That's what's really important about also doing this at the Vatican that they are um, they're not a state that has a lot of interest in it right now, whether you go into the United States context or the EU or China. Those are big states who have a lot at stake in the outcomes of these because technology is, particularly artificial intelligence, is the new space race there. But the Vatican is outside of that and can actually be a neutral party in that, and we can bring together, and its moral authority is also very important as well in that. And so continuing to nurture that space there in a unique way with these with this unique combination of high level and very thoughtful actors there. That's the low bar. The high bar is that, and the real kind of moonshot of it is that we start to put on a pathway thinking and into policy, into changes in industry that really starts to optimize for outcomes for our communities. That's ultimately that we want, that we want the technology to be re-embedded back in our society, ones that we see it, is it working for us? And us and thinking about what it's doing for us on a far broader kind of sense, as opposed to not just is it making us wealthy, but is it bringing flourishing? Are our communities healthy? Or is this place where people are nurturing warm and healthy relationships? Defining what is ethical in emerging technology is a little bit more difficult than it might initially seem. I think there's been a standard way that people have kind of approached it, and this is one like a rule-based way where people are thinking about like what rules should we implement that a lot of people can abide by or should abide by, and then to live within that rule is to live ethically. To live within those boundaries as a technology company is to be an ethical company. And that's been the knee-jerk reaction or like of a lot of proposals out there are those. And where we kind of see the what would count as ethics is what builds agency both at the individual level and as at the community level. Is your technology adding to human agency, adding to the agency of communities, or is it taking away? If it's adding agency, if it's adding capabilities, it's adding ways in which these humans can express their their love, desire, freedom, then it's an ethical technology. If it's removing those, it's an unethical technology. That's a controversial kind of claim there, but one we see that's actually most fitting for a way of assessing and judging whether an emerging technology is good for us or bad for us. Catholic social teaching, or just the Catholic intellectual tradition writ large, is really valuable at this moment in thinking about emerging technology because it's very easy to lose sight of two things. What is the human being? What has God created the human being to be? And what is the end of the human being? And where are we going on that? And the Catholic intellectual tradition has two like clear answers. They're difficult. They're not the simplest answers, of course, is that we're created in the image of God and that where we're going is eternal community with God there. And the way in which like framing that so that technology needs to understand who this human being is embedded in these communities, these relationships there, and each human being has dignity and value as well. And so if technology needs to be reminded of that, um, and technology companies and developers need to be reminded of that, but also understanding that technology that the human being is on a trajectory, is moving towards something that is not just more wealth, not as just being able to buy more things, but is also finding meaning, purpose, and ultimate value in kind of transcendent and eternal goods. And the Catholic tradition helps bring those back into perspective. They're hard to operationalize at times, but they're really important to having on mind when you're thinking about what technology am I going to build? Who am I going to sell this technology to? Because it really is showing like the kind of like the basic facts of what the human community is and where the human community at its highest purpose is going as well. I I think one of the risks, and this is something of an unusual answer, is in our in inaccurately and incorrectly assessing the actual capability of technology and declaring what it does to be intelligence, even when it's not intelligent. And the risk that we have is dumbing down, minimizing, reducing these really important, thick, meaningful concepts like human intelligence. What does that mean? It's a very difficult thing to define succinctly, but it has something to do with the way that we touch, feel, see, think, understand, and how we process all that to make sense, to make meaning, to do action in the world. Those are very difficult things that so an LLM be able to predict the most likely next word. Is that intelligence? That can be impressive. It can sometimes do something, but we need to protect the concepts in these much richer ways. And so it's like what we mean by human intelligence is far more than predicting the next word that would come in a sentence. That's not human intelligence. And so take that writ large. We need to really protect those. And I think one of the biggest risks we're facing right now are people who are redefining terms and redefining really important terms like intelligence in the context of the technology. And so that would be one of the things that I think, and that's actually the space for the Catholic tradition, is to remind us of the richness of these concepts, remind us of why we say this about ourselves. That's also a real call to other scholars to be careful about how they're using it, to remember to bring into the conversation all that they've learned from maybe Aristotle or even like more contemporary and modern thinkers around it, to challenge when a technology says we are building intelligent technology or we're about to have artificial general intelligence, to say, wait a second, that's not what we mean by intelligence.